Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lily Tyson Head, and I'm the daughter of Freddie Lee Tyson. My father was one of the victims in the United States Public Health Service study of untreated syphilis at Tuskegee in Macon County, Alabama. It is an honor to be here on behalf of the Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation and to remember and honor the legacies of the 525 men who were in that egregious study. I'd like to share with you this afternoon some slides that will help you to understand how and when the study started, as well as the stigma and the drama that came with the study. Bear with me as I pull it up. I also would like to thank Howard University for sponsoring such a informative and educational program. As I stated, my father was in the study, and I am the president of Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation. The nature of the United States Public Health Service study of untreated syphilis has been known and still known as the Tuskegee Syphilis study or the Tuskegee experiment. This term has been used for years and found to be misleading and inaccurate. It places blame on Tuskegee, and we are now finally changing the name of the study and what the purpose of the study was from the beginning. This study was the longest therapeutic study in United States medical history. It lasted for 40 years. The study was immoral, it was unethical, and it was deceitful. It was racially and socially motivated, and it was statistically compromised. And by that I mean the records and the data was not kept with the correct protocol, and information was not accurately recorded. It also lacked the ethical protocol that was in place at that time, but completely ignored. The study, as I have mentioned, was is known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study and the Tuskegee Experiment. Let me explain a little bit why it should not have been known as that or given that name from the very beginning. Tuskegee Syphilis Study and Tuskegee Experiment gives the onus, the responsibility, the ownership, and the accountability at the door of Tuskegee. It also places the stigma that is still related to Tuskegee as what, when you mention the name Tuskegee, many will say, oh, that's where that syphilis study took place. And that should not be, instead of the rich history that Tuskegee has. Tuskegee Experiment, there was another experiment which was called the Tuskegee Airman Experiment. And believe it or not, a lot of people confused or not knowing the Tuskegee Experiment of the Tuskegee Airmen with the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. and that is grievously wrong. We should not do that. So help us in correcting that name and calling the study what it was, because it tells you exactly who was the owners of that study and what the intent of that study was from the very beginning. Untreated. The original plan for the study was to last from 6 to 9 months of non-treatment, which even that was considered immoral by some, I would say, but not by the ones who were doing the study. To be followed without, and to be followed with treatment. This fund at the beginning was funded by the Rosenwald Foundation. At least the funds were given to the United States Public Health Service to do this study by Rosenwald Foundation. And then it changed to non-treatment to follow the men to follow the men to their deaths. And this was funded by the United States government. So the non-treatment continued after the 6 months of the study. Assumptions. One of the reasons the study was accepted, I should say, was because of the attitudes about social Darwinism and eugenics. And we all know that both of those was related to evolution and the superior races. There was an unusual, or they felt that it was an unusual opportunity. And by unusual opportunity, it meant that they had knowledge of what syphilis does to the body when it went untreated. However, they did not have it on Black men. This was all familiar with the experiment that they had done in Oslo. Syphilis was prevalent throughout the United States and even in the European countries. There were 5 areas in the South where Rosenwald Foundation were trying to help to better or improve the health of poor Blacks. Tuskegee in Macon County was one of those areas. Tuskegee, believe it or not, and little is known about this, had the lowest number of people with syphilis, yet there were resources there at Tuskegee that they found to be agreeable to their work. Most go untreated and they believe that most go untreated throughout life. And they did not look for treatment. And they believed that syphilis affects Black different. And how was that different? They believed that syphilis would affect the Blacks more in the with the circulatory system rather than with the brains, because they always at that time felt that Negroes or Blacks were inferior and they did not have the intelligence as whites did. And they felt that treatment was not necessary for latent syphilis. The recruitment of the men. The men were recruited in 1932. And I believe from what I have read that the main part of the recruitment started during the fall of the year from the research that I have seen, there was quite a bit of men in the Macon County community that had been approached from, excuse me, from the research. Lies and deception was one of the main thing, was the main thing in how they got the men to agree to. They were told that they had bad blood. And bad blood is a term that was used for any ailment such as anemia, malaria, diabetes, as well as syphilis. And they promised the men treatment for their bad blood. Now, you can imagine in a poor rural county in Macon County where Jim Crow was the law of the land, you didn't have the money for insurances. It was during depression, and everyone was struggling pretty much financially at that time. And the men thought that the doctors from the government would treat them for the bad blood that they had. They were never informed as to the fact that their bad blood was syphilis. Imagine that, not telling them what they had, only lying to them and deceiving them about their bad blood. The men did not consent, as some think, to study where they would not be treated. They never knew that they were not being treated. They believed they were being treated. Another attraction to recruit men was they were offered free medical care and free meals. And the medical care was the fact that they were going to be treated. They were also offered transportation to the hospital or the testing sites. At the end of 25 years, the men received a certificate of participation, and they were given $25 for participating in the study. And this was also to entice them to continue to participate. They still did not know what the study was all about. And they were given money for their funerals, or their families were given money for their funerals if they agreed to the autopsies. And there were over 200 men who had agreed to autopsies. My great uncle was one of those men, and he was in the control group. Collaboration among stakeholders. Well, the first and foremost stakeholder was the United States Public Health Service. And then they had to have the agreement and the cooperation with the state public health service. And then to the county health services and the practitioners there. Tuskegee Institute was also a stakeholder because they allowed the study to be, thinking that it was a good opportunity for Tuskegee to advance in medicine and in science, and was hoping for the best. Their intent was that it would be good for the institution, as well as good for finding out exactly what happened, not realizing the damage that was being done. The draft boards were also was also a stakeholder. And the draft board, especially in Macon County, when the men went to apply for the service, because the war had come on in the 40s, in 1941, 42, the men applied or went to register at the draft board. And if they were on the list that the United States Public Health Service had put out to deny the men of treatment, and to not allow the men to go in if they had treatment, they were denied, and the draft boards agreed to that, and they denied the men there in Tuskegee. Professional publications, there were 13 in the American medical journals. And so the, the medical world really knew about it, how they felt about it at that time is really puzzling to see where, especially after penicillin became the therapy of choice in the mid 1940s. The Center for Disease Control was also a stakeholder because they came aboard in the 1960s. That's where a lot of the autopsies and the specimens of the men were sent. So they also knew about it, and they condoned it because they didn't say anything about it. The doctors, I also like to include, knew about it. They could have spoken out and done something about it, especially after penicillin. The end of the study. At the end, and the study ended 40 years later, from 1932 to 1972. 30 men had died directly from syphilis, and 154 had died from complications related to the disease. 40 wives were infected, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. Remember, I talked about the statistics and how the statistics and the records were being kept. This number, I believe, is not completely accurate. I think there were more men who died directly from syphilis, and more wives and children were affected. And we can only imagine how many might have died or did die from complications of syphilis. It was an egregious study, and it still is something that we must always watch and protect so that it doesn't happen again. Transforming this legacy of the United States Public Health Service study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. The Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation was formed by descendants in 2014. And we decided as a group, as members from different families, to change the narrative of that study. And why, after so many years, did we decide to change the narrative? It all started with our healing process, which was done at Tuskegee University. We met every year after 2011 and participated in healing session. Much credit is due for Dr. Reuben Warren, who encouraged and guided the descendants in working toward the healing process. Doctors Ann and Edward Wimberly were instrumental in being our moderators and helping us to see how we could come empowered to change the narrative. We had shared our emotions and really poured out our feelings. And after those feelings were shared with each other, we knew that we had to do more to honor our ancestors. The narratives that was left by the, the, the research and all of the writings. It left the men in a state where they were only used as poor, uneducated lab guinea pigs. And we knew that not to be the case of our fathers. We had to change that image. And we also had to honor their legacy, as well as use their legacy to be a voice for changing some of the inequities in health and the institutional racism in the system of health. So that's our goal, is to transform the legacy from shame and trauma to honor and triumph. Now, how you say this is being done? Well, it started with the National Presidential Apology in 1997 from President William Clinton. And in 2014, we had the formation of Voices for Our Fathers Legacy Foundation. We had the solidarity of many descendants to come aboard to make a difference and to be a voice for the silent ones. We partnered with the National Center for Bioethics Research and Healthcare at Tuskegee University. And in 2022, we partnered with Millbank Memorial Fund. And Millbank Memorial Fund came forth courageously and apologized for providing or funding the money for the autopsies that I had mentioned earlier, as well as paying for the insurance. Mr. Christopher Collier, who is the president and CEO of Millbank Memorial Fund, called without being asked or persuaded by descendants, came forth and acknowledged what they had done. And the partnership that we have today is powerful and it's enlightening, and hopefully is inspiring others who have done wrong or harmed people. They come forth and acknowledge that and bring with them the attitude and the energy to make a difference. We also recently have partnered with the Department of Health and Human Services. And the partnership there hopefully will lead to finding the answers to what happened and how the specimens, the blood serums and the spinal fluids and the biospecimens were used. How were they used? What was learned from it? What medical treatment or therapy was gained from the research that was done. We know that some tests were made better because of that, but we want to know what happened to all of the other, and why was it necessary to take those specimens for 40 years. Our goals are then to honor the men's humanity. Remember, I spoke of how the men's narrative and their legacies were only poor, uneducated men, and you being used as guinea pigs. We want to honor their humanity because they were human beings. They were worthy of respect, dignity, and they were worthy of care, proper care. They were our fathers, our uncles, our neighbors, our grandfathers, our great grandfathers. And we loved them and they loved us. And we are here today because of them. and their ancestors and their descendants are doing some wonderful, wonderful things. So their lives were not in vain. They contributed to society not only through raising their families the best way they could under those conditions, but also being good citizens uh, for the country and for their in their neighborhood. Some of them were pastors of their churches. They were deacons in their church. They were pillars in their communities. They even worked for the government. My father worked for the government in helping to build the Tuskegee Airmen's Moton Field base, and then becoming a fireman on that base after it was built. So uh, it was really, they were really good men who contributed to society. Our goal is also to research misplaced data so that we can find out what happened and how the tests were used and what was gained from the test and who used the test. And then we also want to address the impact of the study across generations. There are descendants today who are still troubled and who still have physical as well as psychological effects from having someone in that study. And then, of course, address the stigma. It's amazing now to see how many families and persons, descendants, are stepping forward and saying, "Oh, yeah, I think my grandfather or my great grandfather or my uncle was in that study." It's no need for us to feel as though we should hide uh, because we have someone or had someone in the study. There's no need for us to feel ashamed, and there's no need for us to feel stigmatized. We deserved better than that, and we can make that change as far as doing and speaking out for the harm that was done to them and how we can use that platform to make sure it doesn't happen again. Honoring the 625 legacies. And this is how we are actively and passionately doing this now. We foster education, and we start with telling and correcting the misconceptions about the study. A lot of people still, to my dismay, say that the men were injected with the uh, the bacteria for syphilis, but they were not. They were not injected with syphilis, and they use that as a reason why they hesitate or deny themselves the opportunity to get vaccinated. It, and this became so evident during COVID-19 when everyone was being encouraged to get vaccinated for COVID-19. There was so much hesitation, so much doubt, so much distrust. And a lot of people used it, as they referred to the Tuskegee syphilis study, as the reason why. Even some of my relatives would use that. Well, look what they did, they would say to those men, thinking that that was happening still. No, that is wrong. So that's the big part. There are many other parts of that study that's misleading and not true. And we're working to change that, and also to promote the advantages of making sure that you understand how You have control of finding out the facts, unlike the men did not. We were also honoring them by promoting social justice. Because the men were poor and because of their educational level, they were considered less than, and also felt as though that they would not really appreciate the medical attention that they deserved. And then the next is to acknowledge their contribution to the medical research. We all, or we should know, that informed consent was really strengthened after this study. If you go to the doctors now in any medical procedures that you might have, you must sign an informed consent. And I must encourage everyone to read the informed consent and to feel comfortable with understanding what you are signing. That became quite evident. Another one is the the Institutional Review Board, and that is a group, a committee that now oversees all of the biomedical research. And that's a good thing too. That wasn't there. Certain things have to be in place for research to take place now. We're also going to remember and celebrate their lives. They deserve it. They gave so much, and we need to celebrate that because it's making our lives better, especially with the health care that we now can receive. We are revealing their untold stories by writing a book and having descendants to share the stories of how the study affected their lives and their ancestors' lives, as well as how they're using the story to make their lives better and to live better health, to live more of a healthier lifestyle. We award annual scholarships for descendants every year, and descendants are welcome and encouraged to apply for the scholarships. There are criteria for it, but you can find that on our website at voicesforfathers.org. That's voicesforfathers.org. If there are any descendants out there who would like to apply for the scholarships, the scholarship applications will be available at the beginning of January. And while I'm mentioning the website, I like to encourage everyone to go on the website to see the work that we're doing. And if you feel like you would like to support us, please join us in doing that. We're also building a memorial and inspiration garden there at Tuskegee. And we are really proud of that. The garden will be a place of reflection, of healing, and for education, and for anyone to go and to learn more and to feel and to see more, so that they will so be inspired not to let a study like this happen, and to be more of a vocal voice and helping to bring about equity in healthcare. And of course, we are advocating for health equity by talking about the harm of the study with Milbank, Chris Collier, as well as the healing that has taken place with descendants. In order to move on and to move forward and to move away from the shame, the stigma, and the trauma, the best way that we have found is to get involved to make it doesn't happen, to bring something good from something that was so egregious and immorally wrong. Time will not dim the glory of their deeds. Now, this was a quote that was given by, and I thought I had put his name up there, and of course I don't remember it, but it was by a general after World War One of the soldiers, and this was his part of his speech when he spoke about the soldiers. He said, "Time will not dim the glory of their deeds," and I would like to apply that also to these men. Time will not dim the glory of their deeds. And I hope that from heaven above, they are looking down and smiling upon the work that we are doing. We will always remember our fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, uncles, cousins, and fellow human beings. And this picture, you will, it's the faces are blurred, but you see the bodies. And this was taken last year, 2022, when Millbank Memorial Fund came to Tuskegee and apologized to the descendants. These are descendants who had gathered to hear the apology and to welcome the apology, as well as to accept and to forgive, so that we could become on one accord and moving forward to change the narrative of the United States Public Health Service study of untreated syphilis from shame and trauma to honor and triumph. I thank you all very much for listening to me and for this opportunity to share with you the story about the study, the men, and voices for our fathers. Thank you again. And I turn it back over to Jennifer or Patty. And if
well, I see Adrian is on, Ms. Jones Alston.
Mhm. So
did she want to speak?
Yeah, we're here.
Let me open it up.
Ah, there's two of you there.
Yeah.
hello.
Hi, Miss Lily.
Hi.
Okay, well, I'll let you guys continue then.
Okay. Good afternoon or almost good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Arvilla Payne Jackson from Howard University, and I have the privilege of working with both Miss Lily and also with Miss Adrian Jones Alston, who is the founder of Jones Foundation for Returning Citizens, who will be speaking to you about Holmesburg Prison. I'm going to give a little bit of background here. Holmesburg Prison from 1951 to 1974, Dr. Albert Kligman from the University of Pennsylvania, the Department of Dermatology, was invited to Holmesburg Prison to treat toe fungus. And one of the first things that he said when he entered the prison was all he could see was acres of skin. He ended up working with 33 pharmaceutical companies, with the Army to do LSD studies, with the CIA to do mind control work, with the Atomic Energy Commission to do isotopes test, and with Dow Chemical to do test with dioxin, which is an element in Agent Orange, which was used in Vietnam. And if you got it on your skin, it would burn your skin off. When he started this, he started with Holmesburg, but then he took his work and continued it under the table without consent forms, and practiced also on institutionalized mentally challenged children. He went to the Women's Detention Center, he went to the Correction Center, and he went to seniors in rest homes and experimented on them as well. The men were, and women, because there were women involved in this too, were required to sign a release form for any damages that were caused. No explanation was given about the tests that they were about to take. No explanation was given about possible side effects. The protocol that was used was sloppy. There was also incomplete testing. As soon as Dr. Kligman would get a result that he wanted, he would stop the experiment and not take it to the end. And again, they were done under the radar. The tests that the men underwent, there was a whole body of tests that the men underwent, particularly from the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, this included Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and all the big guys, plus a whole bunch of little ones. But they would do lotion tests. They tested toothpaste. They tested protein powders. They tested bubble bath. They tested everything under the sun. But one of the things is they did not take into account was, again, the side effects that was going to happen with some of these tests. One of the worst tests was the patch test, what the men called the patch test. They would take the men and they would take Scotch tape and they would take it, strip it on their back in about a 4-inch square. They would strip the skin off the back using Scotch tape until it reached the white meat. Then they would put on the meat, the white meat part, and that would be the part that they were testing. In some cases, the men burned from this for at least a couple of weeks. There was nothing to get any kind of relief. Taking the patch off, taking a shower, nothing helped. When Mr. Rice, who we were hoping was going to be with us today, was unable to make it, when he went to go do the LSD test, when he heard about that, he heard, oh, gee, I'm going to get a free high. Well, when he got to the LSD office, the man was out for lunch. And one of the old heads came up to him and said, son, don't take that test. And he said the guy's eyes were gyrating like this, not stopping, couldn't stop his eyes from gyrating. And he realized that getting a high was not worth having happen to him what happened to that man. And fortunately, he did not take that. However, when they did the radiation test on him, they made radiation marks on his back. And to this day, 50 years later, he still cannot lie on his back or sit hard against a chair. And then one of the worst side effects that we heard about in an interview with one of the survivors was a man, he had been out for a number of years. His hands got swollen like an 8-ounce boxing glove, and his feet got swollen, and he went to the hospital. And they ended up making an incision at the base of his palm, grabbing the skin and pulling it off, both hands. Then they made an incision at the base of the heel, grabbed the skin and pulled it off. And he said the skin was about an inch and a half thick and looked like pork. He was also a person who still to this day, 50 years later, will have his nails grow out that look like claws, and his hands and his feet will still start itching. And the only way to stop them from itching is to put them in scalding hot water. The one woman that we're going to be interviewing, the only female survivor of any of the tests, was given a test way back in the 50s when they were first coming out with tampons. One exploded inside of her. They didn't get the whole thing out. It ended up infecting her, and she had a hysterectomy. These are some of the horrific things that they did to these men and women and senior citizens and mentally institutionalized young people. One of the questions that is often asked is, why did the men participate if there were so many things going on? First of all, there were no jobs available in the prison for the majority of the men. There were only 3 jobs available to the thousands that were in the prison. But the men needed money for commissary. Anyone who knows anything about prisons knows that the men who are in have to buy things from the commissary. And today, for example, a tube of toothpaste costs $10. If you don't have outside support from your family or friends, then you have to figure out how you're going to get money to buy these things from commissary. And this was part of the way that they were pressured into doing this experimentation. Was it provided them money not only for commissary, but they were promised free phone calls. They were promised cigarettes, which is a form of underground economy. You would buy things using cigarettes, etc. And also they needed money to hire their lawyers or to try and get bail. So it was really kind of a forced situation where they took advantage of the situation of the men, and consequently, not only were the men damaged, but as Miss Jones Alston will now tell you, families were also destroyed by these experiments. And I'm turning it over to her now.
Okay. Hello, ladies. My name is Adrienne Jones Alston, and I am the daughter of Leotis Jones. My father was a survivor of the Holmesburg prison experiments. He participated in the experiments in the 1960s, mid 1960s to the early 1970s. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about him before I get into my part of the story. My father was our breadwinner at home, and he worked long hours. But when his hours were cut back at his job, he resorted to making fast money, and this hustle landed him in prison. That's how he got to Holmesburg prison. He was charged with receiving stolen goods. While he was in prison, as my mother told me, he called home and told her that he was going to participate in these experiments to make some money because it was horrible in there without money. The guys were subject to being beat up by other men if they didn't have money, or they were sold, off to like sex slaves, or they were raped if they didn't have anything to survive off of. So the way to get off the regular blocks in the prison was to participate in the experiments and be moved to H block. That's where all the experiments happened. My father participated in the experiments, and he returned home. We noticed a change in him, and I noticed a change in him, and I was like 5 or 6 years old. And what happened before he went in, we went to a lot of community events, block parties, Fairmount Park. I was born and raised in North Philadelphia, so we participated in a lot of community activities, especially through the summers, but all that stopped after Holmesburg. No more fun. My father was a reserved guy who came home. He was hostile. He was sweating a lot. This is my observation as a child. He became violent at home. Eventually, my mother moved. He took us away because it was unbearable. That upset my whole world. I kind of withdrew, from life, so to speak. Early during my school years, I wasn't interested in school. I wasn't interested in attending. I didn't participate in my schoolwork. And I used to love to spell, in English. And I withdrew from those type of classes because of my anger and disappointment. And I was diagnosed as being emotionally disturbed in my preteens. And I went through life angry. I eventually began to run away. My mother couldn't handle me. So she had me placed in a girls' group home. I ran away from there, started living in the streets, started committing crimes. I began to get little legal charges. I ended up doing that for a while. Eventually, I went to prison because I was out of control. Later on in life, after I had children and I had got married, after I got myself together a little bit, then I was introduced to drugs. That was even worse. I began to support that drug habit by committing crimes, going back and forth in and out of jail and then prison. And I want to bring to light the generational effect. Mind you, not I just said my father was in prison. He came home, our family broke up. As far as I'm concerned, the Holmesburg prison experiments destroyed our family life forever. I can't blame everything on my life on experiments, but it gave me a good jump start. The emotional part just sent me on a roller coaster, and my life went in a downward spiral quickly. When I went to prison, I have 2 children. They had to be placed with family members. Now they have their own withheld resentments, even as adults, because I know one thing: when mental health is untreated, it never goes away. It ends up spilling over into your loved ones' lives. Like my father spilled over into my life, my issues spilled over into my children's life. Now I have grandchildren. Now you see the generational effects of how these experiments contributed to the downward spiral of my life early. I was after my father passed away 6 years ago, and after he passed away, let me back up a little bit. My first view of the physical effects of the experiments on my father was when I walked in the room and he had his shirt off. And when I looked at his back was turned. I looked at his back and it looked like an outbreak of the picture. And I always compare it to that picture of monkeypox. He had raw skin patches on his back, just raw patches, just splotches all over his back. And it scared me. I ran away from my father and I feared him for a long time because of that. I was around 6 years old and I thought he was turning into something. That was my young mind. So that scarred me too. That was very traumatizing for me. So fast forward to what I was saying about how my life went into a downward spiral quickly, and the lives that I caused to be affected because of my behavior, and where I am today. My father passed away 5 years ago, and I was contacted by a University of Penn professor. And he said, I'm doing some research on Dr. Albert Kligman. And every time I pull up Dr. Kligman's name and put in some information, your father is there. My father was there because after years of his mental issues, he got himself together after getting professional help, and he began to advocate. He began to recruit the other guys who were in the prisons, and they came out, and he formed a group, and they started protesting and rallying, and eventually they were invited to Capitol Hill to testify as to why they thought the Holmesburg prison experiments were unethical. Well, as a result of that, eventually the experiments were stopped. As I started looking into this issue a little more, I found out that my father's work that he did, during his advocacy life was a little more in depth than what I thought. He touched a lot of lives, and a lot of important issues surrounding these experiments needed to be addressed. I thought compelled to pick up the torch and address these issues. So here I am. Right now, what's going on is that we just, probably 2 years ago, the University of Pennsylvania apologized. The city of Philadelphia apologized for the part they played. The College of Physicians apologized for the part they played. And so did the city council members of Philadelphia apologize for the part they played. Even though the College of Physicians did not profit, they apologized because they did not address it. And it was on their watch. What's going on right now is I'm kind of disappointed in some professionals who can make a difference in this situation, and they don't. It's almost like when I talk to them, it's like I have a disease and I'm contagious and we don't want to touch it. So what I've done was I've talked to several people, and thankful for Dr. Jackson here for being a supportive person that she was, because when I met her, I was like, get ready to throw in the towel and give up, and she inspired me to keep going forward. So that's what I'm doing. And I want to begin the restorative justice process to find resolutions for this issue. And I feel like the restorative justice process is a direction, is going in the right direction because of the complexity of this issue. I feel like that the students here at Howard could benefit this issue in more ways than one. And I feel like that because they're young, they're researching, they're learning, and they're giving. And I feel like what we could, it's definitely an educational opportunity. It's community engagement. It brings public awareness. It'll empower the survivors. First of all, it will restore some dignity into their lives and their families' lives. The networking and collaboration, will be beneficial for both parts. The research and documentation and just getting organized and mediating through the restorative justice process. The personal growth for everyone involved, I think, will be very beneficial. The advocacy skills could be developed. The long-term impact, because this project, if it goes the way that I'm thinking it'll go, this project will be around for a while because there's layers and layers of issues, ethics issues. It's 30-something pharmaceutical companies that benefited. The popular skincare product, Retin-A, was invented off of the skins of these inmates' backs, literally. Millions and millions of dollars was made off of this, and no accountability. These people who were the profiteers are professionals that we trust with our lives, and they benefited and walked away. A lot of people were harmed, and no one said anything as far as helping them get mental health treatment, any type of compensation, nothing was done, no accountability, and that's not okay. Because to my understanding, in this nation, no one is above the law. A lot of laws were broken. You know, what I would like to see moving forward is I would just like to get a lot more people involved with this project and just see a difference. And it'll show not only the students, but even the ones who were involved. Even though, you know, it's a long time ago, those people are no longer in offices, but it's accountability still for the offices that were operating then. Just like when you break a law, if someone commits a murder, you're gonna walk away from it. If it's 10 or 20 years later, you're still held accountable for that. So these people are accountable. They take oaths for these offices. And this situation continues to be ignored. People were harmed. Mentally disabled children were taken advantage of. Senior citizens on their deathbeds, for the most part, were taken advantage of. They didn't sign no consents because they couldn't. Probably some of the inmates were illiterate. The survivors I talked to today, they don't even have good reading and writing skills, and they're in their 70s and 80s now. And the mental health is just terrible. You know, we need programs to help these people rebuild and help the family members get treatment, because we were scarred. So in the community of Philadelphia as a whole, these people were damaged. They were let out into the community. They wreak havoc. Now you have generations of affected behaviors that are still not being addressed, because some of these people don't even know that they were affected the way they were affected if they had family members who were involved with these experiments. And that's part of the reason why I'm here. I'm just hoping that some people would just hear what I'm saying and join our initiative to bring resolutions to this issue. This story right now, since I've been on this campaign, has gained national recognition. I've done several op-ed pieces. China responded. France has responded. So the story's out there. People are paying attention. I'm just right now pleading with people to join our efforts and just help us get this ball rolling with this project. And I am forever grateful for this platform to be able to come here and speak to you all, and just hoping that we get a good outcome. And I'm just thankful. And I'll close with that. Hello.
I think that
Hi, this is Patty. Yeah, you all have about, I guess, at the most 5 more minutes if you want to take it. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. I don't know if anybody has closing remarks.
Yes, I want to share. Yeah, I'll take a couple minutes to share some of the testimonies of some of the survivors that I've met so far. First, when I started the campaign, it was just me. I gave a visual outside the Holmesburg prison wall one year, and then survivors started calling me. I met Mr. Yusef Anthony, Alan Hornblum, who wrote the book Acres of Skin. Now, Acres of Skin gives a full accounting. The book Acres of Skin gives a full accounting of what happened during these experiments, who were the major players. Everything you need to know about the experiments is in this book. This man did a very thorough job. He also wrote a book, A Sentence to Science, and that book was written on this gentleman I'm talking about, Yusef Anthony, who Dr. Jackson just talked about, had the skin peeled back on his hand because they had to treat him. He also drank that diet shake in the prison, at the hands of Dr. Kligman. When he gave him that diet shake, it immediately started deteriorating his colon. They had to rush him to the hospital. His colon was damaged. His penis was damaged. He, to this day, he's in his 80s now. They're still trying to get solutions to helping him have a proper digestion of his food. He still breaks out an itch. The next one, Mr. Rice, who I met this year, he held this in for 50 years until we met. And he started talking about this issue, and it helped him out a lot. It brought him and his family closer because now they have a better understanding of what was going on with him, just seeing him in the interviews that he participated in this far. So this is what I'm saying, the community effort helps us heal. He's healing, his family is healing by hearing what happened to him, and this is how the process works. It's a few of the survivors. A lot of them has passed away. Some of them died as a result of the experiments and, a declining health. When I went to Philadelphia to find some more survivors, I was made aware that a lot of them passed away during COVID, but it's an ongoing issue and we have a few of them left. And I would like for those guys and that one lady to actually see at least a joint effort in getting resolutions for this ugly, hideous, inhumane situation that affect a lot of human lives. And they wasn't all just incarcerated criminals. You had children and senior citizens. This is a problem. And we have to get on top of this because this can't continue to happen. We have our students going through college. They're seeing this now, they know about it. So we can't just sweep this under the rug anymore. Anything I need to add? Okay, so the survivors are anxious to share their stories on different platforms. So we're starting to do some work already ourselves. We have a website, jonesfound09.com. Jonesfound, FOUND 09.com is our website. You'll see more information. You'll see some of the collaborative projects that I'm doing with an organization in Virginia, which is my residence. It's a reentry community of transitional homes. It's 4 homes. 3 of the homes are for mental health clients coming out of institutions, and 2 of them is for clients who are coming out of the prisons. And I collaborate with the Newport News Sheriff's Department, the Probation and Parole Offices, and Community Services Board. Different organizations call and ask for bed space. And part of my job is to get these people housed into safe, clean housing where they can be connected to the community resources that they need to start their life over, re-entering back into society. So a lot of that information is on the website. If you want to reach out to us, you can. And I think I covered most of everything. I'll turn it back over to Miss Houston. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, yeah. Anything else from Ms. Head or Dr. Jackson?
Just wanted to say, as Adrian was saying, thank you very much for the ability to share the story and to help people become aware of the needs of our communities, and hope that people will join both Miss Lily Head and Miss Adrian Jones Alston in their work to make a difference.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. And we have another session coming up at 4:30 with two different options. So we hope people will join that as well. All
I'd
right.
like to thank everyone
Thank you.
also, and wish Adrienne the very best with her project. And I'm sure that she will begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And of course, always thank my friend, Dr. Jackson. So it was a good opportunity to meet with you and to share the story and the purpose of Voices for Our Father's Legacy Foundation. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, everyone.